anybody think of a word that has that sound in English? Anybody? Well, it took me a few, I think, days or weeks, and I came up with one word in English. Pizza, right? That has inside. So I figured from that point on, I'm good, right? Everybody, I said Zvi like pizza, so I was good at that point, and everybody was going to say my name correctly. Instead, what happened is, I got this nickname, Pizza Boy. So that didn't work out too well. Anyway, I want to share a story that I heard a couple of weeks ago. This was actually on TED, a very interesting lecture. She was talking about a woman that went to a hospital, Beth Israel Hospital in Boston. She was going in to get a surgery on her leg. So she went into the hospital, she got all prepped up for surgery, went into the operating room, got the operation, the surgeon was in there, did the operation, stitched her up, bandaged her up, and sent her to the room. A few hours later, she wakes up, looks down on her body, and her left leg is in bandages. And she calls the nurse and she says, why is my left leg in bandages when the problem is in my right leg? So the comment from the hospital is, we're sorry, you made a mistake. And actually what happened is, the senior vice president for healthcare said this: for whatever reason, the surgeon simply felt that he was on the correct side of the patient. And that's why he operated on the wrong leg. And this actually applies to what we're going to talk about, which is the backing up of configuration and how you guys think that you're doing this correctly, and you might be, but you might not be doing this the right way. So a few quick questions, just raise of hands. Well, it's going to be an obvious question. How many of you guys have checkpoint firewalls? Just raise of hands. Okay. SSL, VPNs, load balancers, WAF. Okay. Less. Content filters, proxies, blue code, that kind of stuff. Switches and routers. Okay, so we have more people with firewalls than switches and routers. How do you actually connect those? Okay, and just raise of hands, the last few years, did any of these devices fail? Just raise of hand. Okay, so about half. So the rest of you are doing good. So let's look at a typical network. Data center, database servers, mainframe, and so forth. We have our users, separate VLANs, and obviously we need something to connect, so we have our networking infrastructure and we have our firewalls. Next layer would be some type of content filter. We would have maybe our web server farm. We would have our load balancer there and our backbone. And let's take the last layer, which would be our connection to the internet with the security and networking infrastructure. And what happens when one of these devices fails? So let's take the firewall, for example, and that one fails. What will obviously happen is we'll take some part of our network down. And my point with this is that all these devices and applications that we're talking about here in this conference are mission critical to maintaining our business continuity and making sure that all our applications, or all our users, whether they're internal or external, are working properly. Now if that device fails, obviously part of our network is down, and we have downtime, which obviously costs money for the organization. So we need to worry about what we do once that happens. Once that device fails, how quickly and how efficiently we can restore our configuration and get back to an operating state, which some of you are probably thinking, well, if one device fails, I have a cluster, so I'm probably good. So I'll be okay, I'll just bring up the other device and I'll be fine. So let's take a look at those two scenarios. So what do we do when we need to recover? So obviously we need the general information, we need to know what version we were running, and we need our licensing information. We need our interfaces, so if you didn't back it up, do we need to somehow have written them down? Or, again, some of you might be thinking, it's no problem, I'll go into my management server, I'll just grab it from my topology. So I'm good there. And what about my routing? So again, if I'm in a cluster environment, again, I'm okay. I have my second node, I'll just go in there, I'll grab the routing from there. So this is okay, I have 7 routes. But in a bigger environment, I might have 109 routes, so that's going to be a little bit more work, right? I have to start typing in. Or the other alternative is I'll not a problem. I'll just go into the netconf.c file. I'll grab that part of the route. I'll copy it to my system. I'll edit it. I'll change all the parameters I need. I'll copy it back. So I might be okay. What about this though? What about all the files that you are not backing up and you're not really sure that you need to until you go into that disaster? I'll take some examples here. So obviously the password file and the shadow file where we keep all our users. fwkern.conf file, if you're running in a cluster environment and you have to put in a magic number, you would need that file as well to restore it. What about the core Excel and secure Excel? If you configure that in advance and you use Affinity just to load balance your performance, you would need that configuration as well. So all these files and all these parameters are files that you need when you're restoring your configuration. It's not enough to have the IPs and routing. A lot of cases that we've seen in the past, people think, going back to my story about being wrong, people think that if I have my IPs and my routing on a firewall module, I'll talk about management in a second, but in a firewall module, I'm good. That's not enough. There's a lot of files that Checkpoint needs in order to be able to bring your system back up to the way it was. And the management, obviously, if that crashes and you don't have any type of backup, then you all know that it's going to be a nightmare to restore that configuration. So let's look at what happens when a device fails. Do we initially have a backup of the configuration? Some of you might have it, some of you might not. If you don't have it, obviously you have to go through the process of rebuilding the entire configuration. Okay, let's say that you do. Is that file current? Most of you that I talked to in the last couple of days mentioned that you use the internal Checkpoint backup procedure, which you go into the web UI, you check that FTP server, you send it to an FTP server. Do you actually check that that file on a daily basis got there? So maybe the FTP server ran out of disk space. Maybe the file is corrupt. Maybe just the cron tab is not working properly and you didn't get that file. So again, you have to do the same work. Okay, so we have that file and it's there. Is it running from the same version? Maybe you upgraded already in the process and that file, that CP backup file, is not going to work between versions. I'll move one step forward. You have that and it's the right version. Can you open the file? How many of you have seen that really horrible message from a backup file saying unexpected end of file on a zip file? So if you don't open that, and then does it have all the information? As I mentioned, all those files that I was talking about that are not part of that backup. And let's say that you have all of this in process and now you have everything, but you just don't know how to restore it. So you have to wait for your professional services guy. So we want to save all that time and all that effort. So I mentioned this before. Obviously, mission-critical applications are behind our networking and security infrastructure. They all contain complex configurations. So if that device fails, you need to work for hours in order to restore it. Downtime costs money, that's obvious. So when do we need a backup? The scenarios, obviously, if we have an RMA, the device just failed on a hardware level. If the OS failed, it can be a corrupted file system. We didn't shut it down properly. Some of the files got corrupted. The system's not going to come up. Software failure. Everybody's working with Checkpoint. That happens, right? Not a lot. Very rarely the software fails, but it happens. Misconfiguration. If you didn't do your revision control and you changed something major, added routes, deleted routes, changed management configuration, and didn't do a revision control, that may be another option. Definitely before upgrades. I hope that's best practice here. Before you go into any upgrade procedure, you back up your files. And the last thing is the product replication. So either you're replicating a cluster, you want to put a call standby firewall somewhere. So these are all the reasons why we would need a backup of our configuration. So from the feedback that I got and actually information that I had before, this is how most of you do your backups today. So if we look at a typical network again, and we look at the networking infrastructure, that's a little bit easier. Probably syslog-based, KiwiCat tools, Cisco Works, Nortel has their tools, so you're probably doing it with that. If we look at our firewalls and UTMs, most of you mentioned that you're going to use the internal Checkpoint mechanism to do that, or you'll do it manually. And then we look at the other devices, all the unique devices, both balancers and web application firewalls and content filters. That's where we have the biggest problem, where you rarely back them up or you back them up manually, which leads to this conclusion. No central application that will give you all the device configuration backup from a single location. And that's where we come in. This product was developed out of a real need for us as a company, as a professional services provider. We were looking for a tool like this that would help us implement the project and then give a total solution using the capabilities of BackBox. So, what do we have? And I'm going to be showing this in a demo in a couple of minutes. So a live dashboard, if some of you are technical here, I'll tell you truthfully, this is more of a marketing thing. All the information here is real-time and live, and you'll get it in the application on a day-to-day basis. You'll probably use this less, but it has color, and it has red and green, so managers like that. Central application will combine all your networking and security devices into a single location. You'll be able to get all your files, all your configurations from a single application on your network. Everything is automated. Once you configure BackBox, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, you'll see how simple that is. Once you do that, everything is automated. You don't even need to log into the applications once it's set up. You'll get an email once it's done. It'll tell you what was successful, what has failed, and for whatever reason it did, so you don't need to do much. As opposed to what you're probably doing today, we will give you a full detail of what we're doing. We're not hiding anything. We didn't invent the script on how to back up a checkpoint firewall. You all know how to do that. We're just automating it. So when we actually back up the firewall, we will show you every step of every command that we ran on that system. We do that for two reasons. One, for you guys, that you'll be sure that what we're doing on the system is exactly what you want us to do. And the second is, if the backup failed for any reason, you want to be able to know why. Obviously, web-based management, so the entire operating system parameters like routing and interfaces and date and time are inside the web-based management. We'll alert you once that backup is complete, either using email or syslog. So if you have a SIM-SOC solution, you want to send off those messages to that and just get aggregated information, you can do that. And disaster recovery templates. I mentioned this before. If you have the backup configuration, but you're not really sure how to restore it, we'll give you step-by-step instructions for every device that we support on how to restore it. So you had your box failed, you got a new one, you take the file from that box, you open this document, and we'll give you step-by-step instructions from the moment you turn on that device, all the steps you need to take in order to fully restore it. What else do we have? Verification, very cool feature. We check that the file that we pull is valid, and I'll explain what that means. We do it on different levels. Let's take the ASCII file, for example. I used this example in the past. So let's take a Cisco switch. That's the easiest example. We know that in the first 2 or 3 lines, Cisco will always show you the version. And we know that the configuration is going to end with !end. We look for those parameters, and if one of them doesn't exist, we'll tell you that the backup is not a good one. You cannot use that backup in order to restore your device. With other products, what we'll do is we'll open the file. So the error that I mentioned before, like unexpected end of file, we open up the TGZ file, we make sure that the file can be opened and it contains the files that we need in order to restore. In addition, we'll look for file size. We know how big files should be or how small they should not be. So if we're backing up a provider 1 and that file is going to come back with 20 megs, we know it's not a valid one. We know you're not going to be able to use it to restore it. Custom device support. We support currently, and I'll show you that slide in a minute, we support 27 vendors, which is about 120 products from those vendors. We did not want to limit you for those devices. Those are the few devices that we tested, that we know that we can back up and fully restore, but you guys might have other devices that we don't support. You have 2 options there. Either contact us, tell us the device, we'll add support to it, or we'll give you the tools to add that device as a supported device. So we don't want you to have BackBox and then use for other devices, other solutions, going back to scripting and manual backups. We want you to be able to insert all your devices in the network into the BackBox solution. So we'll give you the interface to do this. In addition, we'll give you the tools to verify those files. So for each device that you'll add, you'll be able to add that same verification